Thank you all for joining us. My name is Erasma Veras Montecholo, and I am your host for Powering Up with Power of Two, a series in which we engage with community leaders, residents, and advocates to talk about the pressing circumstances facing families and children in New York City, and the steps that we can each take as individuals and as a collective to ensure the health and well-being of our communities. At Power of Two, we partner with families to support them in their healing from trauma, promoting healthier interpersonal interactions between young children and their parents, their extended families, and all of their caregivers in their lives. We operate from the core belief that the power to heal is inherent within the affected individuals themselves. In our partnership with families, we know that the issues of historical racial injustices in policing and the carceral system create a long-lasting generational trauma that affects individuals, families, and entire communities. Often community residents are not given a voice or a seat at the table to transform the dynamics behind the over-policing and the over-incarceration that disproportionately affects our communities of color. Linda Campbell wrote in Wielding Power with Community, Creating Pathways for Change and Transformation, that finding viable solutions to social problems requires that we reconfigure the relationships between those who hold power over communities and those who are impacted by how that power is used. Which brings us to the conversation today with two Brownsville community leaders who are reconfiguring those relationships. We welcome Camara Jackson, founder of Elite Learners, Inc., and Keston Jones, founder of The Farm. Thank you both so much for being here.
Thank you. Thank you for having me.
Thank you for having me. Appreciate it.
Of course. So the organizations that you each have founded individually are both ones whose programming is making profound changes in the lives of so many in Brownsville. Can you share a little bit about what were the trajectories for each of you that led you to creating these organizations?
Camara, you want to go first? Or?
Sure. So again, my name is Camara Jackson, and I am born and raised in Brownsville, from the community. As a former educator, after I stopped teaching, I really realized that there was a gap. There was a gap between school support services and the safety of our students and our young people, our community members. It seems as though there wasn't enough resources really geared to educating and helping families succeed. So I created Elite Learners, Inc., which tackles both. We have educational components to programming and our anti-violence initiatives, which really ensure that our community, has a community policing plan and strategy, and that we're playing a dual part in making sure that individual families are successful.
Keston, what about you?
I think the farm. I was not originally born in Brownsville. I was actually born in Trinidad and Tobago in the West Indies, and I actually grew up on a farm. When I was a kid, we did everything. We dealt with the chickens, the cows, you name it, the vegetables, and it was always something that I remembered as a kid growing up, that we had resources and we took care of each other. It wasn't that we needed to go somewhere else for something, and it was always something that I found missing when I immigrated here in the mid 80s as a young guy. I didn't see that community support that I saw when I was back home. Like, in Trinidad, we were able to, go to the neighbor's home, and it was just really communal. And I just always felt like, I wanted to be a part of creating an environment where we as a community can support one another. So when I think about the farm, I think about earthy. I think about, getting back to the soil. And I think about, Tupac, can a rose grow from the concrete? We know that the rose can grow from the concrete. We see it every day in our community. We see it every day in our residents. So, the farm was founded in 2014. And, since then we've steadily grown into an organization that initially focused on behavioral health workshops, domestic violence, parenting, anger management. But, soon we pivoted and we did a lot of work on Rikers Island. And, over the last few years, we've explored food distribution as well as violence prevention. And for us, we're responding to the needs of the community because the community, this organization is community-led. It's from an individual who's from the community and experienced, you name it, whether it be formerly incarcerated, whether it be education, whether it be being a voice for the community. And I think that one of the things that I want to share today is that we can, amongst ourselves, much like when I was a child. We can support one another and provide resources for ourselves. We don't need to go outside of the community of Brownsville. And for those of us who are from this community, frequent this community, have family who live in this community, we know the special. We know what's special about this community, and we want to elevate that more so than what we've seen, in a snapshot news article or what have you. Like, do not destroy this community and continue to paint it with this image if for one, you're not providing resources. And if you're not doing so, then get out our way so we can come together and collect our resources and support one another.
Right. Yeah. No, thank you. Thank you for sharing that. I mean, one of the things that my team and I are engaging in is in conversations about critical race theory. And we talked recently about, racial battle fatigue and what that does, to individuals, but to the community as a whole. And so having all of these images, and we talked a little bit about this earlier, having these images constantly just bombarded with them, right? And negative explanations or articles about who we are when we know that we're good, right? And it's not a personal issue, right? It's not personal individual issues, it's systemic issues that are causing the problems that we're facing with, right? And so really acknowledging that is really important. But you mentioned something that I wanted to, ask you specifically, and that was the Rikers Reentry Project that you created as part of the farm. Can you tell us a little bit about how did that work, and your insight into the formerly incarcerated or other programming that you have done at the farm give you the perspective that informed your thinking about how truly grassroots community policing model could actually work or look like, or should look like?
I mean, one of the things that for me, I pride myself on being is an example. Is an example of what can happen when various resources come together, but what can happen when you finally made a change. And for me, having gone through being a youth who was incarcerated at 16, it was a very traumatic experience for me. I was a kid in the community and doing things that I didn't have the full picture. And I make no excuses for my actions. As a young man, I dealt with those consequences, and I was incarcerated. And in going through that process, I was able to truly empathize, and I am able to truly empathize with someone who's young and scared, or feeling lonely, or having support and how to garner support. So in developing the program, I'd like to give special thanks to Friends of Island Academy, who, through their relationship allowed us to have a contract within Rikers, and then we were able to get our own. But from the onset, developing the program, I knew I wanted the program to be holistic. I knew I wanted the programs and not just, for us to be able to go in there and talk to them about, daily things, but provide them with a comprehensive resource upon release. And I think that that's what a lot of folks need. We have many people who are in there. There's promises, whether it's family, whether it's friends, or whether it's a system who's, quote unquote, rehabilitation. We've been promised a lot of things, and when individuals are released, they're not provided. So it's important for us to have those resources for them. So through our programming, we go in there. It's not the most ideal situation because of the way Rikers Island is set up. And it's definitely not ideal right now because the program through COVID-19 is kind of on hold. We're no longer able to go in Rikers. So that's something that, for even my staff who looked forward to going in there 3-4 times a week, it was something that was very beneficial to them, because a lot of my guys were people who've been through the system themselves and would like to give back. And I find that in many of the larger and bureaucratic systems who, they may have, a lot of government contracts and these things, it's very difficult for individuals such as myself to get into these positions where our kids really need them. Get into the courts and be a court advocate. It's, oh, this person has a criminal degree or this, that, we can't. But these are the individuals, these credible messengers that provide those resources and really give these youth insight. So I remember, many occasions, and I'm on Rikers Island, I'm talking about a young man is telling me about a rap that he wrote, and, we're helping to, craft the words, or, he's like, yeah, bring me a book. We had a book club. one of the things I did was I said, okay, you want this book? I'll bring this book. But next week when I come back, let's debrief these books. So a lot of it was just being real, and, much like the programming that we have in the community as well as Rikers, it comes from a real perspective. So really appreciate the relationship, want to continue the relationship with Rikers Island, expand it further. But it's not just about the island. It's about the community and what happens when these individuals are released, because majority of them will come back to these communities. And we want to provide them with resources to help their transition.
Yeah, but you're right that, messaging, right, and language matters, and the experience matters, right? So making sure that the folks that are actually going in there and engaging, the people who are currently in Rikers in a conversation, in a dialogue, in a healing, right, and connecting them to the services should be those that have that authentic experience, right? So I hear it. It's a very powerful way of engaging and helping with rehabilitation, right? And for you, Camara, I mean, you are doing similar work with your reentry programs for youth who are reentering society from the judicial system, as well as, violence disruptors that already do work in Brownsville. So can you also answer that question about how does your work and your insight give you perspectives that inform your thinking around, the truly grassroots community work?
Definitely. Much like Keston, we have programs in Rikers Island and Horizon and Crossroads, the detention centers. And, Elite Learners takes an approach of resources, right? So what can we do and how can we aid you to end up in a better place than the place that you're already in, right? And we go in with just that mindset. We're coming in to really get to the root and the cause of the problem, and how do we find those resources to make sure that we're moving and pushing forward. So in all of our programs, that is our end goal, right? We want to build successful individuals. We want to make sure our families are strong. We want to make sure our youth are thriving and that they have what exactly they need in order to make that happen. So as an organization, it's really just finding out the need. And in order for you to be able to do that, you gotta have the credibility. The person has to feel comfortable coming to you. You have to have provided results for someone else, right? Or served another family. Or your programs have to be successful to the point where people don't question what they're gonna get out of working with you. And that's been the benefit of the organization and how we kind of maneuver through all of the programs that we offer. It's off of the great credibility. It's off of being able to get results and not stopping. It's one thing to go into a program, it's one thing to provide a service, it's one thing to work with an individual, right? But it's another thing to be there long term, right? To be able to carry this caseload indefinitely, to be able to make sure that that person can always route back to your program. And you become an extension of family. And that's really what we've built. We've built a solid support system of violence interrupters, hospital responders, lawyers, advocates, financial analysts. Like we've built this kind of cradle of services so that individuals know they can get the help in whatever aspect of life it is, right? Whether it's food, we have the pantry, whatever it is. And that's really important to us because it's so much happening where it's temporary fixes or band-aids over programs, right? A lot of times the work that we do with young people, we don't see the results immediately, right? So which of those organizations are going to be there through it all and to see it to the end and to make sure that our individuals have enough support to keep going. So my credible messages, all of our partners, all of our staff know that it's beyond the immediate. And we have to be accountable and be able to make sure that we're in existence to be able to keep providing these resources and services. So, I agree. It comes from authenticity, just being who you are, but also knowing that everyone wants to make a change or get something out of a program. And that's vital with reentry, right? Listen, I didn't had these hurdles. How are you going to provide those systems to make this easier for me? How do I get to see results? If I'm unemployed, I need job development services. So, we just have a plethora of resources that we make sure that we can provide to our community members.
So I have two follow-up questions to that. The first question is, what I'm hearing is that you provide services based on the specific need on the individual. It's not like you have this, this umbrella and you have, a prescriptive approach, right? That everybody goes through the same process. It sounds like, and correct me if I'm wrong, it sounds like you take the time to spend the time with the individual person to walk through their specific needs, their particular journey, and then identify those specific services that they're going to need to help them in that journey. Is that a correct assessment?
Definitely.
That is integrated into both of your work?
Yes, definitely. And that's important. I every time I go on an island, and the guys are like, "Am I going to see you again?" You know what I mean? Are you going to be one of those groups that come back, right? But not only do they see me there, but when they come home, the organization is usually the first stop, right? And then when they, graduate from whatever programs or get employed, we're usually that person that they come back to this to show the success. And to me, that is when the programming is effective. A lot of our programs, our mentorship programs at school, they're groups, they're oriented, they're workshops, right? But then you always get that individual time with those participants or with those students. And for me, that's what it does. I had a lot of mentors growing up, a lot. And, and those that I was able to really call on and that were really there for me through it all were the ones that were more instrumental in my being. And you always take that second thought, before you go to reroute or do something, you think about it, I worked hard in this programming. What would Mr. Jackson or Mr. Green or, tag, I don't want to disappoint Miss Jackson, right? So it's just good to be able to have that and be that impactful, that people are actually thinking about, the time and the work that you put into your programs and into them.
Right. Keston, I'm assuming the same for you in terms of like your assessment of individual needs rather than, prescriptive approach?
I mean, I think we have to focus on the individual need first and foremost. I think a lot of individuals or organizations or systems came into our neighborhoods and, had an idea about what they wanted for us, but didn't really ask us. When we think about the community of Brownsville and you see the largest, concentration of housing projects in the country, and then you look at, the LBJ's war on poverty and what that did to communities and the dependence on welfare and mass incarceration and fatherless households and all these things are examples of atrocities that has been happening on a legislative level that trickle down on a nationwide level and a community level. And Brownsville is one of those communities when you think about social determinants of health and the concerns that we have about children thriving and reaching their fullest potential. Our communities are suffering in these areas. But if you don't understand how or the nuances of how we quote unquote suffer or how we persevere, because in our quote unquote suffering, we are finding strength in that. We are, doing what we have to do for our families. But in order for us to find out, we have to have the language. We have to understand who they are. We have to be able to speak quote unquote their slang, so they can feel you. And then they'll truly share with you what is going on and what's their needs. So, I think that's one of our strong points. And, Camara alluded to the same thing. We have to, have that realness and that authenticity. They know that when they come to us and we say that, hey, I'll be there, or you can ask for me. They're not gonna come to an office that, there's a stairs with a guard, with a with an elevator, with another room to another room to another room. You're going to speak to the people who truly understand you, have no fear of, just being in your neighborhood and being in the presence. This is something that we're all familiar with. And then I do also think people, respect people with good intentions. good intentions, and also the history to back that up. We want to, when I go and, whatever community we go into and we, say, hey, this is what we're here for. And they look at us like, oh, you know what, I mess with you guys. I appreciate that. Thank you. Even if they're not prepared to do a change in their behavior at that particular point, it's the seed that was planted. Many times, I've, reached out to individuals that wasn't ready, 2 years ago. One of my guys, he was in one of my programs almost 3 years ago. Now he's one of my violence interrupters. He had to go through that process, and and I'm proud every time I look at him, and I'm like, yo, that's an example. And we have to elevate those individuals, elevate those local heroes. Because if you leave it up to anyone else, they will say that we are not worth it. We don't deserve it. There's a reason, why we're in poverty. We just, and that narrative continues to tarnish our communities, and we have to, rise above that. So,
Right.
I agree, and that's the part that makes it real, that human connection that we truly aspire to have with our community.
Right. It's those social relationships and that human connection that really helps in our own healing, but also helps in building, our own resilience, right? And the fact that we've been able to overcome, it's in part because of those human connections. Speaking of human connections, right? Obviously the pandemic has thrown a wrench into that, right? I think all of our organizations' ability to really connect in person. And so, I want to talk about the pilot program, but I want to ask this really important question around how have you been able to make that shift to, a virtual platform at all? Have you done it at all? How have you been able to engage with folks at Rikers or detention centers, because you're limited in your ability to interact in person, and what has that looked like? What, has it been more intense because they need that socialization, and how has each of your program responded to those specific needs?
I mean, so one of the things about like me, I not only am I, a founder of an organization, I'm also a college professor. So I teach at Yeshiva University in the master's program. And I say that to say that the online platform was something that at the university we jumped on quickly. In February, we knew that we were about to head on that platform. So the training that I received, on how to change and shift the lessons in that process, I use the same understanding in my classes. So, this, when we're doing our fatherhood classes, which, are 10 weeks and consists of various lessons such as what does it mean to be a man, what is domestic violence, and all these other areas, what is support, what are resources that you need. All these things we cover in the class. I found that while we lacked or we lost some of the heart that we got in those real life connections. If somebody was, their posture or their body language was a certain way, we had a co-facilitator who would, hey, what's wrong? And then take them out the room or what have you. We lost that. But what we did get was more accessibility. We found that there was a lot less excuses about why, I couldn't make it or running late or the train. So we got more participation in terms of visibility. Individuals got more doses of the lessons as a result of that, but we lacked that area. And I think that, for us, especially in the time during the pandemic, our workshops has been a place where people just come together and are able to find out about resources. Every week they know they're going to hear about whether it be an opportunity for employment, whether it be something for their family, whether it be an announcement. They're well aware of that. In addition, every year we do a celebration of couples event where we give an award to a couple in the community that has shown some kind of way of working together. In our communities, there's this narrative that men and women can't work together. There's this narrative that, communities are devoid of both of us working in concert. And I think that our communities have suffered because in other communities, there's shared wealth. There's mommy's wealth, there's daddy's wealth, there's mommy's paternal grandparent, so on and so forth. And we start our children off with these kind of archetype relationships that consist of just going at it alone. So in doing this work for so many years, my research, I felt that I want to highlight couples that work together. I want to highlight teamwork. So the first year we did it, it was at a big space. We had a great turnout. But this year we had to shift it to online, and it went totally fine. You know, we had performers, we had participation, couples were together in their home, social distancing. So we're still able to connect just like we're doing now. And I'm feeling Camara, I'm feeling you, I'm feeling the people that are listening, even though I can't see them, because we're connected individuals and we'll find a way. So, you know, let's just adjust. We made that pivot, we're here. And, you know, most of us, a lot of us can't wait for the world to open back up because I want to hug you and not have any concerns. But in the meantime, we're going to do the best we can because that's what Brownsville does.
We're survivors. Thank you.
Yeah, definitely. But what I will say, and this is important, our educational programs and that part of the organization was able to shift virtually. We do a lot of home visits. You know, we do a lot of calling and follow up and wellness workshops and just checkups to make sure that our programs and our students are online and that they're advancing academically regardless of the pandemic. So early on in the beginning, we had one-to-one tutoring that was offered to the community just to make sure that our youth weren't lacking behind. But what I will say is I want to take this time to really thank my anti-violence department, because I want to tell you, the staff never stopped working. The office was closed, but they were in those developments, really pushing the stay home. This was early on in the beginning. We were really breaking up any large gatherings that we saw. We gave out over 4,000 hand sanitizers and masks just within Brownsville itself. So I give them the credit, like they never stopped working. And even when I was down, because I have sickle cell disease. So not only did I catch COVID, but I have other concerns. You know, the staff was really there and really out there in the community. So very proud of that work that we did. In fact, the social distance diplomat program is the reason why our COVID numbers didn't rise in Brownsville. You know, and so I gotta shout that out there, because it's grassroots organizations like Elite Learners, like the Farm, like BTTM, that, you know, really make a difference, and people may not realize that we kept those COVID numbers down.
Right.
You know, all this PPE distribution, it was really happening. So I'm just proud of that. But we shifted really quickly. We opened up a new office in the middle of the pandemic, which is important, and not because we necessarily wanted to, but because there was a need. The East Flatbush community was in need of food resources. We were able to deliver to seniors. We were able to keep that pantry going. It's still happening. The office has now evolved into another location. So we did a lot of big things in the middle of a crisis. And I think that's what you want to see. You want to see organizations in the community that can adjust, that could pivot. They're not going to stay down. They're not going to run. And, you know, we're going to really face the problem. And that's the key about Brownsville. Like, that's the survival. You can come from anywhere and you can do anything, but it's those Brownsvillians that really make it happen. You know, and so that's why I'm just so proud. And you know, I come in every day. I come into either one of my offices every day, because staying home and knowing the need just doesn't sit right. And that's what you want to see. My young people are flooding with social distancing, where, you know, the cleaning is happening, the sanitizing, the home visits are still happening, the pantry services are still going, and, you know, we're going to continue to go. But that's why it's important that organizations get the resources.
Right.
Because when you don't have the resources to be able to keep these things smooth and be able to keep them running and keep the only people in the community that are going to risk their lives, right, have been these violence interrupters. So if we don't have the resources to compensate them and keep them afloat, then we have a major problem. And we have a problem that, you know, it's going to make our situation worse rather than make it better. So that's why I always advocate for ensuring that our community gets the resources, the grants, the food pantry services. If anybody's watching and you're in that position, you know, this is living testament of how those funds help and the changes that they make in the community.
Right, exactly. Right, so it goes back to the quote from the beginning, that it's the people within the community itself that are able to, that one, find the solutions and are able to move mountains, right? Especially when there's a need, right? So I want to shift our conversation to talking about the recent Brownsville initiative, right? And that initiative was the safety initiative that was in partnership, the Safe Alliance pilot program that was in partnership with the 73rd Precinct. And I believe it was launched in December. And there's been a lot of talk recently about how successful it has been, and lots of talks from elected officials, but also different precincts who have expressed an interest in actually expanding this to other communities. Like Bedford-Stuyvesant is one that comes to mind fairly quickly. And so I want to ask you, either one of you can answer this question. If you can first describe the pilot for our audience, right? So that they know exactly what it was. And then the second part to that question is, you know, do you deem it a success? And if yes, why? And if no, why not? So who would like to explain what the pilot program is? Keston, would you like to take that on?
I mean, essentially, one of the things I want to start out with, the pilot program, I believe had great intentions. What it was for, the purpose of it in support of our community, all those things, for me, it warmed my heart, especially for a community like Brownsville, where we know, there's a need. So I want to say that, but I hesitated a little bit because I wasn't truly involved in the planning of it. And I don't want to do disservice to the organizers, to the 73rd Precinct, D.I. Anderson, in working with the new head of the 73rd Precinct, and hearing how, a Brownsville, someone who's from the community, knows the community, and hearing the intentions of the project, I was like, you know what, this is dope. This is wonderful. I think that I certainly want to be a part of it. And essentially what it was violence interrupters would be, in a lot of ways, the headline of it. We as individuals who know the community, who there is equity in the community, is trust in the community, police would remove themselves from this particular location, remove themselves from the location and replace police with violence interrupters and other government or community-based resources. They, had a shower and some other things, food. So it was well intentioned, and I think that to discuss or describe whether it was a success or not, we would really have to take a closer look. But one of the things I do want to say is that I did hesitate a little bit. The reason why I hesitated a little bit was I felt that to expand and blow it up in the way that we did without the backing of resources, made it such a claim that if it didn't work, we would never get off the ground with resources. So if it was, and what I'm saying is that, for this to be truly conceived, where we're providing resources to cure violence organizations, police force is not on certain blocks, and we really put money behind it, and put staff behind it, and put a shift behind it, and put collaboration and training behind it, then we can say that, whether it worked or not, because we truly put forth the effort into it. When police force goes out into the community, they have walkie-talkies, they have wagons, they have all these resources, and then we judge them on their ability to perform the job. And I think that in this instance, again, the intentions were great, but I'm always hesitant to say that it was a total success, in fear of people saying we're not going to do it again, or if they believe it wasn't a success or something happened or it was negative. Because like I said, this is a great pilot program. It was a great initiative. In viewing it, from someone who, looked at it from the outside, I think it was well timed, and it's needed. But I would like for more intentionality to be placed behind these projects, more intentionality to be placed in terms of resources and collaboration and working together, so we can have a wonderful outcome, and we can take so much things into consideration, such as, climate, gang activity, resources, language, culture, religious groups, all these things that, individuals such as myself may have more of a understanding of, so we can truly, provide that resource. And I'll pass to Camara.
Thank you, Keston. He said that so eloquently. In fact, the concept behind this pilot program is brilliant. Like, this is the new wave to community policing. It's really a program that's designed where the community-based organizations that are doing violence prevention work can showcase how effective we are, where we can come out in unity together, full force, with supportive resources behind us to make long-lasting community change. See, that's the key. You want long-lasting community change. You want consistency in the community. So if ever you are targeting a specific area like Mother Gaston, you want your book bag, you want your bag to be so packed with resources that directly affect those individuals. You want them to see familiar faces and community-based organizations that they can walk to the offices of those organizations and get that follow-up care, because it's not an issue that we can really solve with a one-week pilot program with limited organizations and resources. So unfortunately, Elite Learners wasn't a part of the pilot program, only because we didn't have enough time to adequately prepare how we were going to serve those individuals on Mother Gaston. I will say that our violence interruption route, we work on Mother Gaston, we're out there every day. We're servicing every day, and us being out there every day, we're able to see and identify some real needs and concerns that have to be addressed when you're really attempting to make change, consistent change, whereas you can actually see the results on a day-to-day basis. And so I am in full support of really getting behind this pilot program and working with fellow organizations in the 73rd Precinct in partnership to push this forward. But we weren't able to participate because everything happened so rapidly. And, that was just the decision that as a coalition, we really had to think about. I tell you, it's one thing, right, when you come in and you concentrate a community. So if you're coming in and you're providing services, much as the organizations that were on Mother Gaston that week, they were coming in to provide services and resources for that week. So those community members that didn't get a chance to take advantage of what was offered throughout that week, they needed places to go after that. Right? So for me, I'm really big on consistency, because I just believe that consistency makes change. Any and everything that we do, if we're not consistent on it, it doesn't make change. So as I am on Mother Gaston, and as the violence interrupters are on Mother Gaston, and as our office is about a block away from Mother Gaston, right, we have to put in that effort every single day. We have to be a reminder every day that we're not pushing violence, that there's alternatives to conflict. We have to keep that messaging clear. We have to make sure that we're backing the needs, and that if there's a lack, we have a solution for it. And that's really how you build credibility and to be able to service and to see change as a whole. I will say, collaboratively, I'm excited. I'm excited that we have the farm and BTTM and Mel and, BCJC. And now we can really start placemaking and really start zoning in on different communities in like different developments and different locations within the Brownsville community to do this stuff. But it has to be something that remains consistent.
Right. And I think, that's one of the things that I have been concerned with or concerned about watching this all happen. And you're right. It's very well intentioned, right? But as a data-driven person, as a data-driven organization, I am a person that regularly interacts in the community, with the community, and partners with the community. I was very concerned about the sustainability. I was very concerned about deeming something a success that lasted 5 days. Very concerned about, just the lack of messaging, right? That it was something that was shared with a limited group of people. It wasn't shared widely. Not everybody in the community knew about it. And it's that constant cycle that we find ourselves in. Something is created, certain organizations get to participate. It's not disseminated, broadly. And so, sustainability becomes an issue. Messaging becomes an issue. And so that's what I was curious about. I was curious about, how can you deem something a success that only lasted 5 days and didn't really fully integrate or engage every single organization that is doing, work like you all are doing, but also organizations that are doing mental health, right? They're doing regular health, they're doing childcare, they're doing education, etc. Because it's, as you all mentioned at the beginning, it's a continuum of services, right? And it's a need, it's a cycle of needs, and you must have those resources available in order to address this need and in order to disrupt, right, the cycle. So that is where I'm excited about it, but I also am reticent because I'm interested in seeing a proper framework, and I'm interested in seeing, those of you that I know to be part of that conversation and actually framing it in a way that is going to make sense for our community longer term.
Definitely. And, as Keston said, community, this is a big deal. When we're talking about decreasing the number of officers that we have in an area that's deemed a high risk area, we have to make sure that we can come out in numbers, right? Because again, we have the safety of our community members at hand and at large. And crisis management and cure violence, we are successful. We have data that drives behind us. We have, leaders of individual organizations that there's no question about the level of success that we have on the street, right? But again, when we look on a larger scale, something as bringing organizations that are working together to do this, the synergy between everybody at the table has to be there. We all have to have the same information. We all have to work on a chord. We all have to know, what the next step is. Because not only, when I go out, I'm not only Camara Jackson, I'm a representative of an anti-violence organization. So I want to make sure that that messaging is consistent with what's being relayed on the street, right? And then carefully monopolizing the relationships between our organizations and police. Because I may not necessarily do my work the way that officers are structured to do theirs. Right? Yeah. So how do we come to the table to have that understanding before we push a pilot out to the community? Because that's important, right? Credibility is huge when it comes to cure violence and crisis management systems in our work, right? So just us having the time to really organize to make sure that this is something that not only is successful, but that it can be duplicated and replicated, and it can be, passed on from precinct to precinct. That takes a lot of planning and a lot of organizing, a lot of time and commitment, dedication, and unfortunately, as a coalition, we just didn't have the time to build on that. But I know elite learners. I know I can speak for my brother Keston here. We're looking forward, we're looking forward to what's next. We're looking forward to how we can build on this initiative and just to work to implement it throughout the community forever, right? We want this to be a normal part of community policing. We want to see more community-led activists and violence interrupters actually in the field, intercepting some of those situations that does not have to relate to arrest.
So let me ask you a follow-up question to that. What do you envision, right? So you say you're hopeful and you're excited about getting involved, but how do you think it needs to be framed so that it can really be sustainable, right? So who are the people that you would like at the table, and who do you think should be leading this? Should it be the precinct? Should it be Commander Anderson? Like who should it be? And then what kind of resources do you need to make this all happen if you're thinking long term?
So definitely community-led. We all have to have a seat at the table. There's no one seat that, we all have to be there. 73rd Precinct, all of the organizations that work within the community, our elected officials. It has to be a community-led approach. We have to have strategic thinking and knowing how to really complement one another. We need to brainstorm to bring all of the resources and cover, the categories in which we're lacking: housing, mental health services, job development. It has to be a holistic approach, and that's the thing. Looking at violence as a public health issue, as a crisis, and really coming together and having this holistic approach of resources. So definitely, it has to be a table big enough for everyone to come together and really draw a plan. When we talk about resources, of course, we're looking for funding. We need the organizations to be funded so that they're able to continue the work. I mean, let's just think about what the funding does. Not only does the funding grow your organizations, but as Keston said earlier, you're giving individuals the opportunity that have been down this route. Right? So they've made that community change. They've made that change. And now they're able to be more influential to residents and community members that have not yet took that vow to change their life around, right? So it's important. We need organizations that have a clear mission and a clear goal, right? We're talking out of the street, completely out, completely working for the benefit of children and bettering this community, without a question. So, the funding does a lot. It allows you to give the mental health services. It allows you to help with the job developments. We have entrepreneurship programs where we're having barbering, we're having wig making. Our young people are getting their cosmetology license. They're opening up their own shops and they're becoming entrepreneurs. So that's what the funding does. It allows for us to provide healing resources in our communities.
Right.
But all of this stuff, more importantly, has to be consistent. Right. So it has to be a situation where we know that we're going to be supported. We know that we're going to be able to grow, and we know that we're going to be able to meet the needs of the community as we're out there finding those needs.
Yeah. Yeah, sorry to interrupt you. I want to just ask a question, and I see that we have a couple of questions from the audience as well. But how do you think we can have conversations about the role that police have played in perpetuating the trauma that our community has experienced, right? How do you integrate those conversations into a program like the Safety Pilot Program? Because that's important, right? Even though it's community-led, we're still partnering with police in this, right? So how do you have those conversations that can help inform how they relate to the community, but also how the community relates to law enforcement?
So Keston, you can jump in. I just want to say, we have to start having the conversations, but it has to be the same conversation, right? So we, as a community, we have to have one conversation with one common goal, and NYPD has to really stay on that conversation. So if we deem something a goal at the 73rd precinct, it has to be something that is trickled down from one PP. You know, we have to have one conversation and one goal and clear methods on how we're going to push this forward. Mayor de Blasio had a state of address yesterday, and he talked exactly about this, about the plan of the city moving forward with community policing. But it has to be a direct plan of the city that remains consistent, and then, you know, flushes out in our communities and how we do the work.
I wanted to add to that because Camara is exactly right in terms of that, but I also want to also speak about acknowledgement that our community has been hurt by this institution. And I think sometimes, you know, when you're in the process of, you know, you may be an individual that did some harm and you are remorseful and you want to, you know, help, or you want to, you know, go to someone and say, I apologize. That person, you know, based on what they've been through, they're not ready for that. And through our conversations with the community has some real concerns about police presence in times. And I'm not talking about the intention and questioning the intention of leadership or you know, the approach and the new direction that police wants to go in. I'm saying that this is historical. This is not just, you know, a one case that happened last year or another case that happened. This is for centuries. This has happened, you know, in terms of even why police was created. You know, slave catchers and all these other things. If people truly knew the history, they'd know that this is just not, you know, you had, you know, oppressing the people for so many years, and then just the next day, it's like, okay, we've changed, and, you know, come and trust us. So I just want to acknowledge that, like, we should understand that the community has been impacted. Black and brown individuals has been, you know, over policed. In every walk, you know, in me being a part of the system, I saw who was in there. You know, being in family court, dealing with ACS, I see whose families are in there. You know, so these systems are you know, we're overrepresented in these systems, and our community, we don't. It's not like, you know, we're volunteering for something that's good. In many ways, it's causing us to be in this position. So I say all that to say that we do believe that these conversations should happen, but I think these conversations should happen in a way that we're the liaisons for the community. We're able to demystify some of the things that they're talking about, like they're, you know, whether it be a program that they're offering, they may have good intentions and offer a toy giveaway or offer resources, but if the community doesn't trust them, you know, nobody will show up. And I think that that's where organizations such as ourselves comes in, where we're able to say, all right, let's meet. We understand, you know, there isn't any concern about us being, you know, informants and all these other things, but these are concerns that this community has about people who even interact with law enforcement. But they trust us to be honest and to be real and represent their best interests. So in terms of us communicating and talking to not only police, but our stakeholders, our you know, elected officials, we need to have those real conversations. And then as a result of this, you know, we should be able to go back to the community and spread the news. And if this community policing really adopts in the way that it should be, then there's many things that will be, you know, rectified early before it even gets to a problem, before it even gets to police. So we're helping out in this process. Right. Another thing I wanted to say is that one of the things that we can do in terms of bringing this whole thing together, Camara is right about resources, but for organizations, especially grassroots organizations, it's very difficult to get resources at times. Elected officials in our community will be like, oh my God, we gave you funding, you know, and then it takes us a year to get them funding because the process can be so arduous and things like that. Or even how they even, you know, respect us as even having the ability to do it, to do the work. You know, they'll say, you know, we hear you, but, you know, we'll give this millions of dollars to somebody else and they can somehow help you out. I think you have to respect the work that we're doing, respect us when we come to the table, but also for us to really have a seat at the table and really be part of the activation of these placemaking projects, and also the leadership, and also having control of these resources. I think that, you know, for so many years, you know, communities of color in particular have been spoon-fed resources, you know, spoon-fed how we are able to support ourselves. You know, a mother who has a child and she's seeking help, in order to get help, she has to, like, go into the system. But if she goes to a back to work program and gets a job and makes $2 or $3 over this threshold, she's no longer eligible for the program. But these $2 or $3, dollars over this threshold is not enough for her to have sustainability. So we create this feedback loop within our community that makes it difficult for us to, rise above this. So we have to have those conversations as well. Like, stop playing with us.
Right.
If you're truly saying you're going to help us, don't give us this fake goal that we reach and we attain to, and most of us, and tries we may fall back. So I want to say that as well. But I do have, the community has a desire to have conversations with law enforcement, has conversations with elected officials.
Mm-hmm.
But we want our voices, and when we do speak of solutions, for them to really be considered, as opposed to coming in our community and some researcher who's from Yale or Harvard, and then they come with an idea and then you run with it and put like park benches with like books on the ground. And it's like, okay,
I know what
this is what you decided. Like, we're like saying ABC. We came to so many focus groups, and now you're saying we need yoga and park benches. Okay.
Right. I hear
and no
you.
offense to yoga and park benches.
No. Of course, I think all of those things play an important role in it. But we keep reiterating this, and we want everybody to get that message that the solutions to the issues that ail us can be found within the communities themselves, right? So we are the affected people, and we know exactly what we need. Stop telling us what we need. We need to tell you, and you need to listen. There are just two final questions that I have. One is from audience member. Do you know which CMS organizations participated, and was Elite and Farm's decision not to participate in the pilot a collective decision?
Yes. So we met collectively as a consortium, and we decided not to participate. So it was a collective decision.
Okay.
And there were organizations that participated in the pilot program.
Okay, great. And I guess, I'm looking at the time, it's 12:57. So I have just one additional question related to, if you had a magic wand, right, each of you, and you can share it if you want, that's perfectly fine too. But if you had a magic wand and you were able to create something positive for Brownsville, what would that be? What is it that you want to see in our community of Brownsville, Brooklyn?
So mine would be unity amongst the individuals in the community. We have to unite and work together. We're all phenomenal, by ourselves, but we really make change as a collective when you come together. So I wish I could just create this amazing building that was just a resource or a hub for all of our organizations to work out of on a daily basis, and just a place that we could meet and really strategize and carry out community change as a result of unity. I really want to see us walk together and really make this change as one.
Wonderful. Thank you, Camara. And Keston?
I was about to say the same thing. I was about to say the same thing. That's why I smiled. I think for us, on January 6th of this year, you had a faction of people that stormed the Capitol. And part of, whether we agree with why they did it or not, their ability to do it had a lot to do with them coming together unified. And I think that just as these quote unquote hate groups, or whatever groups you want to characterize them, come together and they're able to do that, we need to find a common ground or something for us to get behind, for our numbers to be truly respected. Because Brownsville is a community that we're out there, and so many things are distracting us right now. So, whether it be resources, trying to get a job, whether it be your children. So I get it. But if we can come and find a common ground or a common cause or a common situation for our numbers to truly be realized, because it's really about numbers. If we say that this is the issue and, we get on a meeting or get on a call and only 5 people show up, or the community board only X amount of people are saying this, then they may not believe that the community, has this problem. And that's why I think like the census campaign that came out, like the timing of the pandemic was one of the worst times that can happen, because of how important our numbers and our voices and our presence, needed to be in this community. So I'm hopeful that, my part that we played at the farm, doing completes of so many people and so many residents. I feel that we all need to do our part, but it's important that whenever we can find those instances for us to come together and show not only the community, but other people that you just can't come in here and just push, resources or open up a clinic or whatever. I mean, I remember certain times back in the days, like who are you? Like, no, you're not going to open that up in here. And I think that we have to get back to that kind of feeling where we're able to truly, support and police our own community.
Thank you. Thank you both so much for talking with me today, and talking about, reimagining safety in our community and reimagining the relationships between the community and law enforcement. Really appreciate you taking the time. To all of you watching and listening, I will leave you with one of my favorite quotes from Nelson Mandela, and that is that safety and security, I hope I don't butcher this, but safety and security don't just happen. They are the result of collective consensus and public investment. So we owe it to our children, the most vulnerable citizens in our society, a life that is free of violence and of fear. And our children and community more broadly shouldn't live in fear of those that have sworn an oath to serve and protect. So thank you, Keston and Camara, for joining me today. Thank you to all of our listeners. Take really good care. We'll talk soon.
Bye-bye.
Everyone.
Oh, I get this. I can't.